Well, good afternoon and welcome to the third and last panel here at the conference. My name is Colonel Art Athens. I have the good fortune of serving as the director of the Stockdale Center for Ethical Leadership here at the Naval Academy. And actually, General Sattler and I have adjoining offices, so I get his motivation every single day when he is in town. And he's the real thing when it comes to leadership. I can attest to that. And Sergeant Major Kent being the same kind of professional. Our focus for this particular panel is the continuum going from being a follower and growing into a leader, learning how that process works, and also back to a theme we've heard a couple of times the last couple of days, and that is serving both as a leader and a follower. And it's kind of a follow-on to the presentation that was just given, but in a panel format. And this will be the last chance to engage with a panel on this issue of followership. And I know the Commandant of Midshipmen earlier today talked about this book that had a great impact on him, Everything You Needed to Know You Learned in Kindergarten. And he read off some of the table of contents, and one of them was to take a nap. And I just wanted to encourage you not to do that right now. It is important, but this is a panel you're going to want to hear some insights from a very diverse group, which I think is very helpful. My aim is that I'm going to introduce the panelists one at a time. They have a couple of minutes to talk about their thoughts on this subject, and I'm going to go right down from Master Chief Campa all the way down to Kristine at the end. And then once they're done, just like the other panels, we'll open the microphones for you to ask questions. And again, this is an opportunity to think through what you've heard from them and others and really challenge and ask those kinds of questions that can help you and us to all be better followers and leaders. So let me start with Master Chief Petty Officer Campa. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1980, served as a hospital corpsman. And all us Marines always love our corpsmen because of what they have done for us over the years and continue to do. They're great partners. And was later selected for the Command Master Chief program. He's led thousands of sailors at sea and on shore. His Navy career culminated in his selection as the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, the MCPON is often called, the first minority to become the top enlisted sailor in the United States Navy, a position where he was the principal advisor to the Chief of Naval Operations, Secretary of the Navy, and the Secretary of Defense on all matters involving Navy enlisted policy. Upon retirement, he worked as the Vice President, Center for Leadership Excellence for CACI International, a very large corporation. But he's now the Chief Executive Officer for KCK with Sergeant Major Kemp, whose mission is to provide employment opportunities for veterans and their family members, a just great organization. So please join me in welcoming the former Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, Master Chief Petty Officer Campa.
Well, thank you for that introduction. And you know what, I want to stand because I feel there's a little barrier between us, and I'll stay within the time limit for my remarks, but it's an honor to be here with you and talk a little bit about leadership. It's a tough act to follow. My good friends, General Sattler and my brother, Carlton Kent. But I want to talk to you for a few minutes about something that really shaped my life. And as you heard, you hear the bio and it sounds great. They always mention your last job, but it's not how I started out in the Navy. I started out in the Navy chipping paint, swabbing decks as an E1 deck seaman. Now, was it hard? Absolutely. Did I complain? You bet. But I came away from that experience with something much more than I bargained for, and something that I carry with me to this very day. And it's something that gave me a deep sense of purpose as a follower, and it guided me and gave me strength as a leader. And that's the essence of what it means to serve our nation from the sea. Now, my first chief was someone who had spent most of his 30 years serving at sea, and it showed. His uniform always had kind of a white tint to it from the constant sun, spray of the salt, and spray of the ocean. Now, this chief was a man of very few words, but when he spoke, you listened. He knew his rate, he knew the ship, and he had a sixth sense about the sea. And he also had an incredible presence. When he walked into a space, the tone of the entire space changed. And if you were doing something you know you shouldn't, you immediately stopped. And when he'd walk about the ship and check on his sailors, and he'd go up to the bridge to check on the watchstanders, when he stepped to the pilot house, even the captain would sit a little bit straighter in his chair. Now, that was my first chief. Now, a few weeks after I checked on board this ship, we were scheduled to do a Westpac deployment, and our first Liberty port was going to be Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Now, a few days before pulling in, as you can imagine, the talk across the ship was things to see and do in Hawaii, and we were pretty excited. And in keeping with tradition, we manned the rails in our best uniform as we made our way into port, and I'll never forget the sight of pulling into Pearl Harbor for the first time. Ladies and gentlemen, it was magnificent. And after we got the ship tied up and secure, the chief mustered a group of us and to give us our Liberty brief, the do's and don'ts of Liberty in Hawaii. And of course, he's given us the list of places to stay away from, and we're making mental notes because, of course, those are the first places we're going to visit. And then right before he cut us loose, he said, I want the following 5 sailors to muster with me on the pier at 1600 and be in your best uniform. And he started calling out names. And I silently prayed that I wasn't going to be one of them, because we were in 3-section duty. This was my Liberty night. But lo and behold, he called my name. Now, he didn't tell us why we had to be there, what was it about, and we were too scared to ask. But we showed up, and he loaded us into a small boat, and he took us across the harbor. And after a few moments, it was apparent where we were going. We pulled up to the Arizona Memorial. He led us off that small boat, and he led us to the wall with all the names inscribed. And as he stood there and stared at it, you can almost see a physical transformation of him. Everything changed. I even saw tears well up in his eyes. And then he pulled us off to the side, and he started to tell us the story of the attack on Pearl Harbor. Now, he told the story not in any way that you're going to read it in a history book or find it in a website. He told it in a way that was passed down to him from one generation of sailor to the next. He told us of brave acts that sailors did that day. He spoke of sailors whose names history did not record, but whose service and sacrifice made our Navy what it is today. And then he told us the story of the sinking of the Arizona. How 1,100 men went down with their ship, permanently entombed and forever on watch. He told us we were on hallowed ground. And as he spoke, we listened, not because we had to, but at this point we wanted to, because I think we all realized what he was giving us was a gift. And that gift was a piece of our naval heritage. And as I said, it's something that's given me a great sense of comfort throughout my career, no matter what stage I was in. Now, I'm sure I went out and had a great time on Liberty in Hawaii, but that's not what I remember about my first Liberty port. And I don't know what made him pick me that day, but I'm sure glad that he did, because I got to see through his eyes what it meant to serve our nation from the sea. And as you grow in your leadership continuum, soldier, sailor, Coast Guardman, Marine, to lead effectively, you have to understand what you're part of. As you heard, that the leaders they talked about, that General Sattler and Sergeant Major talked about, you're going to come across those that will not inspire you. But you'll always draw strength, and your compass will always be set on the right course if you know what you're part of. Thank you.
I think you can see why the United States Navy would want him leading the force. Thank you for those words. Mr. Robert Richer is a former Marine. We try to have as many Marines in part of the program as possible, so he is also a former Marine who served as a rifle platoon commander, weapons company commander, a recruit series commander, and an intelligence officer during Operation Desert Storm. But additionally, Mr. Richer had a long and distinguished career with the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, to include service as the chief of the Near East and South Asia Division, responsible for clandestine service operations throughout that region of the world, and the associate deputy director for operations, responsible for leading the clandestine services worldwide collection and operational efforts. After retirement from the CIA, Mr. Richer became the Vice President of Intelligence for Blackwater, now called Academy, and subsequently served as the Chief Executive Officer of Total Intelligence Solutions. Mr. Richer now provides consultation for Middle East and national security issues. He had just mentioned that he's just returned from Iraq and Jordan, so he has very recent knowledge, and we're very excited you're with us. Please welcome Mr. Richer.
Thank you. Thank you. In trying to frame my points, I decided to take my two worlds. My two worlds were the world of the Marine Corps, which I served for 11 years on active duty, and the world of the CIA, which is a completely different world in many ways than the world of the military. I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1971 and went to Paris Island. That was a time of great turmoil in the military. We had civil rights issues. We had returning Vietnam vets who all they wanted to do was get out of the service. We had a national dialogue about where we wanted to go as a country and what we wanted to do with our military. I entered that environment after coming from a protected, more or less protected environment of a Jesuit-driven Catholic high school, where again, I think I was prepared well for the Marine Corps because it gave me clarity of focus. At Paris Island, it's the easiest thing in the world to be a follower. They tell you exactly what you're going to do every minute of every day. And that was probably the last chance that I actually, in my life, where the purity of being a follower came to home. Drill instructors gave me clarity. They told me exactly what I was going to do. They actually cared, contrary to popular misconceptions. They cared about what we did every day and what we turned into at the end of that process, which was a Marine. And they had the capability to make that happen. I progressed up through the ranks, NCO, got picked up for a program called MESEP, got a commission, became an officer, and started the process all over again as a leader follower. And during that process, I learned all the acronyms that the Marine Corps teaches so well, which have probably changed or been modified. BAMSIS, begin planning or range planning, troop leading steps, the 5-paragraph order, all the things that help us give capabilities and develop a leader. Then they gave me the understanding of what a leader should be like. Then they exposed me to people who were leaders to help me develop. And over that time in the military, the three key points that I come back to were clarity of focus. I always knew what I was going to do. The officers above me or the Marines with me made it easy for me to understand mission and focus. They communicated greatly, and they cared. And I think under that title, which is mission, whether it's in the private sector, whether it's in an academic sector, or it's in the military sector, that the idea that you care and you work under an umbrella of mission was key to me moving forward as a leader, a follower, or both. The agency's a different world. So I left the Marine Corps as a captain, commanding a weapons company, and then as a series commander, and showed up at how we train people. And our training program's about 2 years long. And I went from being a leader to a follower and an individual. Now, anyone who's in the machine, the military machines, understands that, well, we are individuals, and I know the one mantra of we're an army of one in one of the services. The difference being is that we actually train people to go out and recruit and handle spies, which is you do it by yourself. There's no one behind you. There's no one next to you. So I had to learn to operate by myself, to lead myself, to focus on mission. Our organization in itself does not play well with others. Just read our history. Talk to any of the senior military commanders who had to deal with us in Afghanistan and Iraq. We don't play well with others. It's how we're individuals. We train people to work on their own. So towards the end of my career, when I first met General Sattler was at CENTCOM at the time, later on head to Iraq. I had to subordinate quite a few of the things that I'd learned and that I could do on my own. And I did that because he communicated well. I did that because the U.S. military made me understand that their mission was prime, mine was subordinate. Throughout that process of time, whether it was as a second lieutenant, was a private, a sergeant, a case officer, that's a person who recruits and handles spies, as a manager and as a leader, I go back to three things. Clarity. My best leaders were those who told me what I needed to do and what was expected of me. Those who followed me and those who were great followers expressed that same clarity up. They spoke up and they spoke strongly about why they thought something was right, like the example of the Sergeant Major going into General Sattler and correcting an idea about how the southern flank of that battle at Fallujah. They spoke up, and they spoke up clearly and succinctly, understanding that their words would be received. I think caring across the board, and whether you're a guy recruiting a spy in a dark alley or in a coffee shop, whether you're a captain, a sergeant, or a private, the fact that your leaders care for you. And I think for me, particularly in my brief exposure with Blackwater in the private sector, where I've seen the greatest failings in officers and leaders in the private or public sector, has been their inability to care for those who they lead and for the mission that they're supposed to be part of. So again, those three key points for me: clarity, caring, and capabilities were critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we move from sailors and spies to soccer. I love it. So you're going to get an exposure to a different approach. How does it work? Or maybe it's actually the same. So to help us, Coach Tony DiCicco is someone who helped put women's soccer on the map in the United States and truly worldwide. He coached the U.S. women's national team from 1994 to 1999, leading the team to their first gold medal in the 1996 Olympics that I remember very distinctly watching that on television, and it was part of this expansion of women's soccer, and a world championship in 1999. As the U.S. women's head coach, he compiled an incredible record of 103 wins, 8 losses, and 8 ties. He was the founding commissioner of the Women's Soccer Association and coached the Boston Breakers of the Women's Professional Soccer League. Coach DiCicco is the president of SoccerPlus and continues to educate and inspire student athletes. Please join me in welcoming Coach DiCicco.
Thank you, Art. I have to admit I feel a little inadequate here after hearing from Master Chief and somebody that served in our military and the CIA. I've paid all my taxes. I feel good about that. Because I'm just a coach of a game. And yes, there's leadership there. And in my mind, leaders create followers, because without followers, there can't be any leaders. And leaders create followers that create leaders. And I look at it as layers of leadership, meaning there's someone setting a direction. The top leader might be the coach in my case, or the captain. And then there's all kinds of layers of leadership that I guess fall into followership. There's the role model, and Kristine, Lilly sitting next to me, was the perfect role model for a coach, because every day at training, she challenged herself. She had an unbelievable consistency in every day at training and every game she ever played, and she led her team that way. And we had a Julie Foudy, some of you may know of Julie Foudy's TV personality, was a vocal leader. And then we had support leaders. And that's the way I addressed it to them. Everyone had to have a role in leadership, and if they didn't know what their role was in leadership, they had to find it. So that support leader was maybe the young player coming into the team that had to support the direction that the top leaders were choosing. So, but being a follower wasn't enough. We wanted dynamic followership. We wanted players, in my case, that were enthusiastic, that had a sense of loyalty, integrity, that could think critically, but also would be open and courageous enough to offer some critical suggestions. And that's the way we tried to build our team, by creating a culture where there was a lot of unwritten rules. And that's how I kind of define culture. It's unwritten rules. It's kind of, guide you the way that our team behaves or the organization behaves. So things like fitness mattered. And if you came into a training camp and you weren't fit, that was like a huge insult to the rest of your teammates. And those players that did that regularly kind of weeded themselves off the team. But other parts of our culture were fun. Don't take yourself too seriously. Have fun. This is a game we're playing. Yeah, it was really important when we were in a gold medal game or a world championship game or playing against some of our top opponents like Norway, which we used to call the Viking bitches, but we also had a lot of respect for them because they stretched us as far as we could to try to stay ahead of them as we evolved our game. So when I think of my team, and Kristine's part of that, what's neat about Kristine is when I coached her on the national team, am I embarrassing you?
No, not yet.
Good, I hope I am. When I coached her on the national team, she didn't say a lot. She just went out and performed at a level that everyone else tried to perform at. And then when I coached her professionally on the Boston Breakers, she was the #1 leader. She was the one setting direction. So talk about the continuum of leadership. She's a living example of that. I'll finish with one story. It was our captain on the women's national team was Carla Overbeck. And not many people know of Carla Overbeck, but Karen Gabera and Kristine and we know of Carla Overbeck because she was an unbelievable leader. And in that 1999 game, and I don't know how many here, if any, were at the, I think it's FedEx Stadium now, here in Washington, and we played Germany. And in the first 5 minutes of the game, Brandi Chastain scored an own goal, and that's when you kick it into the wrong goal. It's called an own goal. She was chasing a ball down. She was looking over her shoulder at where the German defender was, and she went to pass it back to our goalkeeper. And our goalkeeper was sprinting out, calling for the ball, but because there was 65,000 people in the stadium, they didn't make eye contact. Brandi didn't hear Brian Ascuri calling for the ball, and it went into the goal. I passed out for a short time, but I came to, and what was neat about this, and I didn't know this until after the World Cup, and I was doing a clinic with Brandi, and one of the young players said, "What was your favorite moment in the World Cup?" And now Brandi was the one that scored the penalty kick and pulled off her shirt at the end. And scoring the penalty kick in a World Cup championship game in front of 90,000 people in the Rose Bowl, I figured that was a pretty easy answer. But that's not what she said. She thought for a second and she said, "My best moment and my worst moment were about 20 seconds apart. My worst moment is when I scored the own goal against Germany, and I started to walk back upfield, and I was in a daze. And that's when the best thing of the World Cup happened to me. And that's when our captain, Carla Overbeck, ran up to me, looked me in the eyes, and said, Brandi, we have 85 minutes. Excuse me. I got excited. We've got 85 minutes. We'll get that goal back, but we need you to play." And Brandi said that snapped her back into the game. And we were down 2-1 in the second half, and Brandi Chastain scores the tying goal. And I don't think she scores that unless she had that sort of leadership, that sort of support. And that's the type of leaders that start maybe as followers that can emerge and become top leaders in any organization. I just want to close by saying thank you all for those that have served, for those that are serving, and for those that will serve. Thank you on behalf of my family and all of America.
Thank you, Coach. So our final panelist is Ms. Kristine Lilly, and she was a member of the U.S. Women's National Soccer Team, if you hadn't picked that up already. And if I have this right, it's for 23 years, is that accurate? So for 23 years, she's had a part of the U.S. Women's National Soccer Team and played for Coach DiCicco during his tenure as the head coach. So if you think about a champion, listen to this resume. She was a 4-time national champion at the University of North Carolina, a 2-time gold medalist, a 2-time world champion. She's in the United States Olympic Hall of Fame, and in addition to her contributions at the national level, she also played professional soccer for the Boston Breakers, again connecting up with Coach DiCicco. She's currently the director of the Kristine Lilly Soccer Academy and teaches soccer and inspires young athletes all over the country. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Lilly.
Thank you. I'm getting excited listening to Tony's stories, and good that he didn't use any of mine to share, so you won't hear any repetition from over here. But I have been so fortunate in my career to have had so many great leaders, and I think for me it was so great because there was never really one that was the same. And I think leaders are, the similar part of leaders is that they lead. But I think how they do it, I think is unique to each person. My first leader that I had was my older brother. I would never say this to him, but he was my leader. He's 4 years older, and when I was young, he was playing soccer, he was playing baseball, football, anything he did, I wanted to do. And the one thing that he let me do was to play. Him and his friends would go outside, and I'm like, can I play? And it wasn't like, no, you're too young, or you're a girl. He was like, come on. And as I got older, and he was playing soccer outside, he's like, I'm picking you first, too. So it kind of paid off a little bit. But he was the first person that showed me that I can do something, that there was no reason why I couldn't be out there playing. So he set the tone for me on, pretty much being a follower. I just wanted to do it. So I made sure when I went out with him, the only rule that I had to follow with him was I couldn't cry. He's like, you're not going to be crying out here with me and the guys. So I was like, okay. So that was the one rule. So I knew I had to work hard, be able to keep playing with them. So that was my first example. So as I went through life trying to play, I was picking up bits and pieces from different people that were leading me, coaches, parents, friends, other people that were stepping up. I was taking bits and pieces. And when I was 16, it led me to the national team. I was a junior in high school. And Anson Dorrance was a coach at the time, and I was a young kid, so I'm doing whatever I'm told, I'm doing it. Whatever older person's telling me to do something, I'm doing it, because I'm making sure I'm doing the right things, following the right way. And Anson was our coach at the time, and he used to always say to us, he goes, we have to sell the game, sell the game, sell the game. And back in the late 80s, early 90s, soccer wasn't very big here, let alone women's soccer. So I was like, what is he talking about, sell the game? I'm like, I just want to play soccer and have some fun. But little did we know in the process that he was showing us what we needed to do to sell the game, to get people to come watch us, to show what we had to share, not only our skill, but our personality and how much we love the game. So that was a great example for me to see that, hey, it's not just about doing what you're doing. You're trying to spread the word. You're trying to lead others to see why they should follow soccer. And people did. And then Tony came along and continued that process. But what Tony did for me, every day he used to come to practice and he'd stand out in the middle of the soccer field. He's like, I love my job. He'd yell it, and we're like, he is crazy. But he loved it, but he also loved us. So in that aspect, he took over the leadership role of doing something he loved by, showing us. Every day he stepped out there, he cared about what happened on that field. He cared about what happened to us. And that drew us together. He became like a family situation. So we're all part of families, and you want to make your family proud. You want to work hard. So we did whatever we had to do to make that happen. And that was a total different, avenue than Anson said as well. And then along the same lines, I have Julie Foudy and Carla Overback, who were my captains pretty much most of my career. Both of them very different. Julie's a very outspoken and passionate person. Carla's more reserved, but you made sure you did what Carla said because you didn't want to get on her bad side. But she also found the way to, if you're having a rough day, she'd be like, come on, Lil. Or if you're having a good day, but she wanted more, she's like, you can do better. She had the way of reaching you. And it wasn't in any way, it's just the way that she talked to you to get you to do something or to get you back in mindset. And I thought those two players had this, piggyback with each other that was so powerful. And we really needed it because in 1996, we were the first time Olympics for soccer. And at that same time, we were fighting with U.S. Soccer about getting paid. So from 1987 to 1995, we weren't getting paid from U.S. Soccer at all. The men's side was. We were getting $10 a day, and I thought that was exciting. I was like, all right, sweet. But then we realized, wow, we should get paid for this? This is great. So we had a decision to make. It was 1996. We were getting ready to go in the Olympics, but we wanted to fight. U.S. Soccer wanted to give us money for gold and money for silver, a bonus structure, but they didn't want to do it for bronze. And we're like, well, that's not right. So we decided, you know what, we're not going to go in unless, we get it for the bronze as well because we believe that was right. And we got into this big fight, and we had to not enter a training camp in January. So Tony took a group of players into a camp in January, and the Olympics will be that July, and the rest of us were not going in. So I'm 25 years old, first Olympics. I am so scared because I'm not going to be able to play in Olympics because of what we're trying to fight for. But what eased me was Julie and Carla, because whatever they said, we believed. We felt that strength of their leadership and how much they thought, you know what, you guys, if we stick together as a unit, we can fight this. We can make it happen. And we did. We've got the bonus for a bronze. We met Tony the next month, and then we won gold. So I think for me, the people that I was so fortunate to be around, coaches, other players, was such a lesson to learn on being a leader, how to lead, caring about something. And then when I transitioned into being a leader, it was one of those things that it just kind of happened. I think I looked at myself as a leader at all. It was one of those things where like, okay, here I am. Now I'm going to lead by example. That was my method of leading. It was making sure I got the work done, making sure I was fit, making sure, the players knew that I cared about them. Because I thought those are things that were important to me when I was a follower, for people to feel. So I wanted to make sure that they felt that as well with me. So been so fortunate to have been such an impact from so many others, and hopefully have had such an impact on others as well. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, so you all know the routine. There's 2 microphones. We've got, again, a wide variety of experiences here, and you have, just like you had in the last presentation with a sergeant major and a general who are working together in a military context, here you have a player and a coach. It might be interesting to ask them about some of the tough days that they experienced as follower and leader as well to kind of get that going as well. So we'll start right here with your question.
Good afternoon. Midshipman 2nd Class Cawthon. First of all, thank you all for spending your afternoons with us. Master Chief Campa, this question is for you. Having ascended from the bottom to the top of the enlisted ranks, could you offer some advice to a young junior officer or a young professional when it comes to leading people with more experience and professional knowledge than they have in their field?
Yeah, that's a good question. So leading someone with more experience and professional knowledge, and for those, and I'll speak to the Navy, we have a great relationship on the deck plates of our Navy that I think contributes to the development of all our junior officers, and that's the relationship between the chief and the division officer. And the chief is going to want you to succeed. The division officers that I see succeed the quickest are those that aren't afraid to ask for help. And I think we saw a perfect example. And you know what? That relationship between the chief and division officer at that deck plate level, it goes all the way up to the top. At every level of your career, you'll have that. And we saw a perfect display of that with the sergeant major and the general. It's that level of trust and respect that you have for each other. Now, I was telling our Coast Guard colleagues that are here, my son, I have a son who's a JO in the Coast Guard. And my greatest wish for him when he went to his first ship is that he'd have a good chief, some to show him the way. And I was very fortunate, he was very fortunate that he did. And sometimes, you you've learned a lot in school. Everyone here is very intelligent. And my son had a little way about himself where he wanted to impress that upon people. But that chief, in his way, put him straight. And he learned. And you know, sometimes I thought my son would think he was the smartest guy in the room, that chief would gently remind him he wasn't. But it's building that, and it's building that trust between each other. And don't be afraid to ask for help. And I think the general said it, and I know the Sergeant Major Carlton, as Master Chief of the Navy, I would pick up the phone and ask for help. If I didn't know something, I would ask for it.
Thank you, Master Chief.
Can I just follow on that question, because I'm interested. Does that ever happen in the CIA? In other words, does a leader in the CIA have people under them that actually have more experience than they do, or is it not work that way?
Many of us think we are. Or yes, it does. It happens quite a bit. The clandestine service is broken down to people who, as I've said, recruit spies. There are junior people who can recruit a spy in hours and days and weeks, and there are senior people who've tried to recruit spies, have got promoted by rank, by length of service on that. So quite often you have someone trying to direct someone how to do something they've never done. So,
And how do you handle that in the CIA?
we handle that by going to people who've made a career path of doing certain things that allowed them to succeed in the system. We look for our chiefs.
Okay.
And we do. We have people who don't get promoted, but they can recruit anyone. And so they progress on the operational side up to full performance, just to use our own words, where they are recognized as the experts in their technical or skill sets. And it may not be the guy in charge of the ship or the station, as we call it, but they're the ones who know how the station should work. So we turn to our chiefs.
Okay. So it takes the same requirement, a little humility and a realization there are people smarter than you, no matter what the organization probably is. Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, panel. I have a question for Miss Lilly. Miss Lilly, what was it like being a 16-year-old teenager on the USA national team? Was your evolution as a leader expedited by the experiences you had on the 1987 national team, or were you immersed in learning the art of followership during that time?
I think what I was so lucky about, I was 16 when I started, so I had that process of learning. And I think throughout my career, like I was talking about, I just took bits and pieces from everyone. I played my role. I was 16. I didn't have much of a voice then. I led by example. I did my work that I had to do on the field. I had to pick up the pennies, cones, water, someone's shoes, shine or whatever. The things you had to do. And I believe we all have a process. I think we come in, we have a process we have to do. We have to build up and earn the respect. And I think throughout the time that I was on the national team, I did earn my respect. And I think the bottom line was showing I could be fit and ready to play. I worked hard. I didn't rustle feathers. I'd like to sometimes, but I decided not to. But I learned the process, and I think there is a process. And I took bits and pieces, but in the end, I ended up leading my own way, and that was by example, was the best way that I thought I could do that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Midshipman First Class Cody Stuvey. My question is for the entire panel, but do you believe that mission or vision for your team, your command, is better developed over time, or is it better to create it prior to training or prior to competing?
Coach, you want to start with that one as far as actually developing a vision for the team? How much do you involve your followers, and when do you do it?
Yeah, my style, my leadership style is to create the vision. So obviously when the women's national team went into any Olympics or World Championship, our vision was to win the championship, to win the gold medal. And I wanted the players to know that vision, and I wanted our leadership, our captains, to kind of carry that with me. And because I think that you have to be an inner winner before you can be an outer champion. So you've got to kind of wear that expectation and get comfortable with that expectation, and then you can start to achieve that expectation.
I think that's a great question. I think it's important. I agree with Tony. You have to have that vision. You have to understand it. But you're not going to create it and realize that vision without your people. And if they don't understand, a vision cannot be a secret. You have to be able to articulate that so people understand where you want to go, and then you have a lot of people to help you get there. But I think it's so important, and I've seen good organizations, great organizations, and you see change in leadership, and the new leadership comes in, and it's, you hear crickets. What does this person want to do? Where are we going? Yeah, we know the mission, but what's the overall mission? Because you guys are in an incredible position. People want to believe. They want to believe in you. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And we all have at each level a leader that has a vision to fill in that piece. And you have to understand how to put that together. And I tell you, I've worked for some great people who didn't have very good visions. And their vision, sometimes I felt that there was people that didn't, a vision's got to be something you reach for. It's got to make you stretch. If you set your vision too low, just like in the Olympic team, you're never going to get there. So I think you have to have it.
I'll just add one thing. Tony definitely had the vision for us, and I can remember we were in, I think, Germany, and you started doing the imaging. We thought he was crazy, but he'd have us lay down on the grass after practice, and we would just kind of relax, and he would talk through, imagine yourself scoring the winning goal, imagine yourself running up the field, imagine yourself putting that gold medal on your neck. And in the beginning, we were like, he is crazy. But we kind of like, all right, this feels good, seeing myself do that, seeing my teammates be successful, encouraging my teammates. And he set that tone for us, and, we bought into it, and we wanted to be the best. So that was a great start for us, so thanks, Tom.
What happens, though, on the sports side, though, when you have a vision, let's win the Olympic gold medal. We don't win it that year. Hey, the vision this year is win an Olympic gold medal. What does that look like for a team?
I think when you set a vision, and I like the word vision rather than goal, because vision is something you can kind of see. I think you set a vision and you go after it, and if you come up short, no one can ever take away what you did achieve. And, I've heard people say, well, you don't want to set a goal that's too high. And my expression is dream big, but then get a plan together on how you're going to achieve that. I coached a great group of athletes and that had, tremendous talent, but they also had, because talent isn't enough. You'll see so many people with talent. I know many of you have seen people with tremendous talent, not only on the sports arena, but in other aspects of life. But talent won't get you to where you want to be unless you have the work ethic and the vision and the commitment and the follow through. So if you don't reach your goal, your vision, you're still going to achieve something it's pretty real and something that may not quite be where you wanted to get, but no one can ever take away from you what you did achieve.
Yeah, great thought.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Master Chief Campa, your choice to stand in front of the table to speak, removing the barrier between yourself and your audience, is an exemplary metaphor for the servant leadership that, and followership of which you, General Sattler, and Major Kent spoke. Is such presentational charisma essential to great leadership?
Well, I think it helps. I think you have to show that you're engaged. And you saw the general and sergeant major were right there with you. And so if you can put yourself out there, when you're speaking to someone and you're speaking to a group, you're giving you a little bit of yourself out there. There's no barrier. You're totally transparent. And I think that's important, and it's important to make that connection, with, the audience that you're speaking to, and that goes to every single level. And most of the problems, and Sergeant Major and I see this. We worked for this one organization. It's a great organization, but if you got to the problems in that organization, all stem down to one thing: communication. And a lot of times it was communication at the top, not being out there, not articulating a vision, where they wanted to go, what they wanted to do, and feeling part of it. You heard a great demonstration of that today. You've got to connect with the people that look to you for leadership and remove those barriers.
Thank you.
Jen Baker, currently at Cornell University as the director of the Leadership Development Program specifically for student athletes. So I'm going to direct my question to Kristine and Tony. I know there are a number of other student athletes here in the room, and more broadly, athletics provides a great context through which to hone followership and leadership skills. And I just would love to hear from your personal experiences what you think the best strategies are for helping younger athletes make the transition from follower up to team leader.
Well, I think since I did that process, you got to take everything in. You have to observe, you have to follow, pick instances that you respect more or you see yourself doing maybe one day, and learning the process. I think it's something, some players, we had some teammates that I think would have been great leaders, but they didn't like that leadership role. But they were leading when they didn't realize it. So I think we all do have a leadership component in us. It's whether we accept it and really want to take hold of it. I didn't take hold of mine until probably towards the end of my career because I had so many great people around me, so I became the support system for them. And Tony mentioned that about having support system leadership. I think it's so important because you could be a leader, but if you don't have that group of 4, 5, 6 players around you that are going to keep what you believe going, it's going to kind of go to the wayside if other people think differently. So I think taking hold of what others do, I can remember instance in my career, Carla, we used to run fitness tests. We would do suicides, cones, 120s, and these thing called Rickies, which were 3 different size boxes, and you had to run around. It doesn't seem as difficult as it was, but it was so tiring. And we had our last one, and then Carla, our captain at the time, yells out, "One more, coach." And everyone's like, "What?" And then I was like, "Oh, it's Carla speaking. We better do one more." If other player said that, everyone would have been yelling. I'm like, "No way, no way." But she earned that respect. So that Winston for me stood out so much because we respect her. So we're like, "Oh, we can do one more." So I think picking up on little things like that and then finding your niche. You got to be true to yourself. I can't lead like Tony. I can't lead like Carla. I had to lead myself to earn that respect. So I think players have to remember that. To not try to be someone else, be yourself, and find something that really hold on to that makes you confident to get your message across, I think will help.
Yeah, I think that we have to, as leaders, if you're in a leadership position, you have to help the followers to know how they should behave or should choose to behave with passion, with enthusiasm, with loyalty, because there can be all kinds of followers. It could be like the sheep follower that doesn't really show a lot of initiative and is pretty passive. That's not the type of followership we want to develop, because the followership we want to develop are become the leaders in the next evolution. So that passion and that enthusiasm, that integrity, honesty, and being courageous in dissent sometimes, I think is what we want to, as leaders, instill in the people that are in those follower positions. And remember, leadership, if you're going to be a leader, people have to trust you, they have to like you, they have to buy into your vision. So there's ways that the leaders can reach followers and make them dynamic followers rather than just passive followers.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Midshipman First Class Guild, Texas A&M University. So at A&M, we use the term followership to describe what we teach our freshmen during their first year at A&M. But this year, we've kind of shifted a little bit, and we've, in conjunction, coined the term and kind of started to use it more, self-leadership. That freshman year, they're not just learning how to follow others, but they're learning how to lead the most difficult person they're going to lead for the rest of their lives, and that's themselves. Because we feel that before they can start to lead others, they have to learn how to lead themselves, at least at a basic level. So my question is, throughout your lives, how have you learned how to lead yourselves, possibly while also leading others and following others, and how have you overcome the challenges of leading yourself?
Great question. So I'm going to have each panelist actually address that one if we could. So how have you learned to lead yourself as part of this followership leadership continuum?
Yeah, that's a tough question, actually. That is I think that's something you constantly grapple with. I think as if you're going to be a leader, no matter what type of leader in a community, and you have to set some sort of discipline about yourself. You have to set boundaries for things that you will and will not do. And I think there's satisfaction that comes with that because, I consider myself a continuous student of leadership. I was listening to, some of the things that each of these panel members said, and I took notes because I'm going to think about those things and what they said in the context of what they said. But I don't think we ever get to the point where we know it all as a leader. I think it's a constant process. Every job that I went to, and even now, at this stage of my life, I want to be a better person. I want to share my experience so people don't make the same mistakes that I did. But I think you have to set some boundaries, some self-discipline, which is sometimes hard because once you're out of this wonderful organization, who's going to set those parameters for yourself? And I think anything that I do now as a business person, the leadership and the things that I fall back on are everything that I've learned growing up in the military, and I continue to hold myself to those things.
Yeah, I've grappled with this for years. I think part of it is exposure, being exposed to circumstances, situations. I think it's having good mentors and others who can help you look at yourself. And many times, I had a senior secretary named Penny for 6 years in the agency, in very difficult times. She would tell me, Mr. Richer, when I would make a hard decision, say, no, it's going to be this way because I say it's this way, it's got to be done, or I'm going to fire this person because they aren't performing the standards, she always said, step back and look at yourself. I think for me, whether it was thinking about being an officer in the Marine Corps, whether it was transferring to the agency or in the private sector, I think being a little humble, I think looking at yourself in the mirror before you make a decision, talking it through to yourself, maybe not in front of a mirror, your classmates might get nervous, but on your own. And to be honest with you, I think I've learned more from my children and my wife and close friends about self-leadership, self-discipline, and self-development. Now, that's a man who's 60 years old speaking who can look at that from a retrospective point of view. But I think that looking at yourself, always looking at what you decided to do and why you did it, even if you've done it, even if you've made a bad decision or a good decision. But I think taking a retrospective look at things helps you greatly.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think self-leadership comes, I think, from your values. So you have to know what your values are, what's important to you. And they may change, but I think it's a life pursuit. Self-leadership is a life pursuit. And I think whenever there's a question on what your next direction is, I think you fall back on your values and use your values as your guiding light as far as how you lead yourself.
I think back to when I was a younger player on the national team, and in the late 80s, early 90s, we didn't get together much as a U.S. team. We didn't have the professional league. We didn't have clubs to play with. So we did a lot of training on our own. So in that time, if you wanted to be on the national team, you had to make sure you get your stuff done, not with the team when you're at home. And I can remember, I grew up in Connecticut in snow days. I didn't want to go train, so I found other ways to stay fit, and I would run up and down my parents' stairs for a half hour. My dad came home one night, he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I got to work out. But that was my priority. I knew if I wanted to be on that national team, I had to be fit and be able to do that. So that was a motivation. Also, personally, my motivation was never wanting to let people down. So if I wanted, to make my parents happy, I knew if I was succeeding in soccer or doing well in soccer, that would make it happen. If I were coaches, teammates, I just wanted to make sure I put the work in. So that's got me motivated, to do, my self-leadership in a sense. And then I took stuff from teammates, to help that process continue.
Thank you.
It's a good question. A guy named D. Hock, who founded Visa International, once wrote an article that said that over 60% of your time as a leader should be spent not not as General Sattler would say self-aggrandizement or self-centeredness, but thinking about how we lead ourselves and then the rest of the time split the other way. And we don't think that way often of how important that subject is, so thanks for asking that. Yes, ma'am.
My question is for Kristine and Tony. Being on a team where things aren't going as planned or coming off losing seasons, how do you as a leader keep the team on board that the hard work will pay off and the positive culture to move forward?
Can you
He
repeat
didn't
the
have
last
too
part?
many losing seasons, I don't know, based on that record. They said a losing season, kind of how do you keep people engaged and motivated, and how do you keep those followers following you?
Well, we did have a, didn't turn out to be a losing season, but when Kristine and I were with the Boston Breakers, we played actually here in Washington. We won our first game against Abby Wambach, started the season great, and then we went 10 games without a win. We had a bunch of losses and some ties, and it was really tough on the team. And we talked about it, and I always had leadership meetings, like every Thursday. They'd crowd into my office, and, I'd want them to know how practice was going. Were they fit? Did they need more fitness? Were the practices enjoyable? Were they getting, what else did they want to do? But we would talk about this losing streak we were on, and we just, as a group said, let's stay together. We can turn this around. We can turn this around. I got a call from the owner, and I'm sure he was this close to firing me, and I said to him, I really believe we're going to turn this around. I got some young players that are going to start producing, and we're going to turn this around. And then the next 11 games, 9 wins, 1 loss, and 1 tie. So I think when you're having a losing season, it's not necessarily an overhaul. It's little adjustments that make big differences. But the most important thing is for everybody to stay together, keep fighting, and support each other. I call it support coefficient. When you have real support on your team, players go out on the field and they're able to perform without any of that baggage, thinking that their teammates think they shouldn't be on the field. They have support from their team. They can go out, and then now they can strive to play towards their trademark abilities. And hopefully they have 2 or 3 that they can display.
I think Tony hit it pretty well, but I think as a player during that time, and as the captain, you still got to go out every day, do your work, but also because you're not happy as a player in this situation, but you have to come across that you're doing fine as a captain and leader, and also still find the fun. It's no fun to lose. So you still have to find a way. What we're doing out there is soccer, and it is fun. And if we keep our message going, keep our training going, keeping the vision in sight, I think things change. And obviously, that season it did. So I think you just got to keep plugging away. And it's never easy. So one of our sports psychologists with the team should always say, act as if. Act as if everyth's fine.
Yeah, she had a great expression. It was like, fake it until you make it. But I remember that to me, it was one of my best coaching seasons because of how we turned it around. And, it was because we had leaders like Kristine on the team, and we just kept saying, you're creating opportunities, goals will start to come, just keep doing what you're doing, and we'll turn this around. And then we had a great finish to the season. It was really an enjoyable season, but it started like a disaster.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good afternoon. I have a very quick question for anyone on this panel. My question is, what's the most difficult or insane decision that you've ever had to make? And what was the process by which you went about making this decision, and what you took away from the process?
Well, one popped to mind, and I don't want to take, because I'm learning a lot from listening to everybody, but I coached our junior Olympic team, our U20 team in 2008, and we won a world championship down in Chile. But I had to cut the 2 best players on that team. And one was because of, leadership is charisma. And I had one of them was just a negative leader. She undermined everything I did. So, I cut the 2 stars from the team. And of course, people within the game of soccer, even within U.S. soccer, questioned what I was doing. The next time I brought the team into camp, they thought they were playing awful. And I said, what's wrong with you guys? And they said, well, you cut these 2 players. We think you're going to cut us all. So it was a little bit of a crazy thing. But once I did that and I kind of carved out the negative leaders and let the real positive leaders take over. That team came together. It was unbelievable. And we went to Chile and dominated every team.
Anybody else want to throw in a tough decision?
At the onset of the invasion of Iraq by our forces, D-Day was scheduled for a certain date. We had a source come out and tell us Saddam was going to be at a farm with his ex-wife. And it was unreliable information. Well, it depends how you look at it. It was 50% reliable information, but killing Saddam we thought may have stopped us having to invade or changed the scope of the invasion. So based on one thread of information, we had to go see the president. We had to brief the president that we wanted him to advance the bombing of Iraq by 2 days because of some pretty flimsy information. We were wrong. He wasn't there. We tipped our hand. It was an insane decision, but it was a decision that could have saved lives. So,
Okay.
I think as a leader, you're faced with tough decisions all the time. But I think we all develop a decision methodology of a process that we go through to make. You want to make the best decision, and sometimes those decisions have negative consequences for certain people. If a recommendation that I have to make, and I recall one time I had to, Chief of Naval Operations and I disagreed completely on something, and it became pretty heated. And in fact, I thought he was going to come across the desk at me. And I wanted to support his decision, but I didn't believe in that decision. So we took a time out. And he said, look, let's regroup on this in the next couple days. And we got back together, and we both gave a little bit, and I was able to go walk out, and I think you heard someone else say it today, it became my decision. And I did, sometimes the decisions you make to accept something are the toughest decisions, especially when the boss wants to make that happen. But once it became my decision, once I understood the clarity, I worked my butt off to make it happen and make it a success.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. This particular question is directed to Master Chief Petty Officer Campa and Mr. Richer. What qualities should leaders aspire to embody in order to inspire their followers when there is great risk involved in accomplishing a mission?
thank you, Chief. Honesty, first of all. In sending people into harm's way or being sent into harm's way, you want to know exactly what the risks are and what you're going to do, and you want to believe that your leadership is telling you the truth. So back to my opening comments, clarity. I found that by looking someone in the eye and telling the truth, it's made a difference. And I'll give you an example. Right after 9/11, our country was reeling, and we had to have a quick win. We had to get people into Afghanistan basically overnight. The U.S. military needed 30 to 60 days to get their people mobilized because the military moves in a different way. So we had to convince men and women from our organization within 14 days of 9/11 that we could, one, get them into Afghanistan, put them on a mountaintop, get them, and they would be able to convince tribal leaders to help our forces when they arrived. And we had to teach them how to ride a horse overnight or a mule. We sat there and we went through all the stuff you go through in those situations, to include having the admin people behind you to talk to them about health insurance, life insurance, and all the other bad things. But the point was, in talking to them after the fact, it was knowing that what we said was in fact what was going to happen, that we couldn't guarantee them anything except what we told them, and there was nothing hidden, no hidden agenda. So I think clarity has been, for me and for those I've sent in harm's way, been the most important. Number one most important thing. Number two is trust. I've been blessed to trust the leaders that have sent me in places like that, and hopefully those I've sent have had the same trust.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think that, the folks sending, if you have to inspire, I felt that a lot of times you'd go into, tough situations if you're visiting folks. I used to go into theater and visit, our SEALs, our Seabees, our Navy corpsmen serving with Marines, and those guys faced every day was a tough day for them. And at the height of some of the conflict out there, and I sometimes I wondered how much I was inspiring. But, and I said those things because I believed in those things and I believed in what they were doing, But I always walked away, God, feeling more inspired by them and seeing them and what they were doing and just how great these young men and women were. I don't know that what I said so much inspired them, but I think I was validating what they already believed in. And my goal, especially with some of those guys, that was holding the reins in. I mean, those guys, those men and women were just incredible. So, and the thing that you have to be, and I think you kind of touched on it, is sincerity. You never want to undersell, you never want to oversell and underdeliver. That's the worst thing you can do. You say it, and when you're talking to them, when you're talking to people, people need to hear the tone of your voice, the conviction in what you're saying, the belief and passion. And if you've evolved that way, they're going to have that trust in you. But good question, and I you made me think a little bit, and that's why I kind of punted.
Thank you.
That's great. Please, go ahead.
Hi, Midshipman First Class Moore. Coach DiCicco, this is for you. I was just wondering, was the transition from player to coach a challenge? And if so, what aspects of the follower-leader continuum assisted you along the way?
Was the change from player to coach?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, I would still love to be playing. But, obviously you reach a point where you need to, if you want to stay in the game, and for me, team was always sacred. It's a sacred community, everybody pulling together to try to reach a vision. And I always, we trained for the Olympics or the World Cup in '99, the team came into residency, and I always loved that journey because it was like two different lives. It was a journey of the team working together, leading up to the event. And then when you got into the event, it had its own energy, you were kind of brought to places just based on the schedule you had to follow. And so that had its own energy. So for me, going from player to coach was a natural evolution because, I'd like to think I was the type of player that was a little bit of a coach on the field, kind of organized, and I supported teammates. And being a coach, especially when you had players like Kristine, and I'm not trying to embarrass her, but that team, I never had a discipline. I coached it for 5 years, never had a disciplinary problem. They were just a dream team to work with. And, I hope everybody that works with a team or group, a unit or whatever, has an opportunity to work with a team that I had the opportunity to work with because it was a privilege.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Afternoon, Midshipman First Class Uterbrook from here at the Naval Academy. Mr. Campa, this question is going to be geared to you, but Mr. Richer, I appreciate some input from you as well. Master Chief Campa, what leadership examples did you really see as an enlisted sailor that shaped more of what you did as a senior enlisted in the United States Navy? And what advice would you give a junior officer or someone that's about to become a junior officer in 4 months?
So what leadership example, can you say that one more time?
What examples of leadership as a E1, as a young enlisted sailor, did you use to really shape what you used as a leader at the highest levels of leadership?
You heard Carlton Kent say it earlier, I never forgot where I came from. I mean, you talk about a follower. I told you I started out as a deck seaman. There's no one that can follow you because you are it. So I became a very good follower. And I never forgot where I came from. And I tell you, when we talk about inspiration, and I was thinking some things, so I was a command master chief of a guided missile destroyer, kind of the Gucci ship out in the fleet, and it was fairly new ship, still had that new ship type of smell to it. It was beautiful, immaculate. And so I used to walk around it in the evening time on deployment, check on how sailors were doing. And, the trash has to go somewhere. All the wet garbage has to be processed. And I'm going down into, where we process that stuff. And I could hear someone working back there. And there's a sailor working by himself. He's putting all this wet garbage, packing it. We have these compressors down there that does it. I mean, and the stench is bad. And what happens is you get rotated into those positions, kind of when a very junior person and some division has to cough up some person. But I walked, and I had been down there before, but I walked in there and this place was immaculate. And this guy was just doing the best he could. And so I called him over, I started talking to him, and I said, well, how do you feel about what you're doing? And he said, about what I'm doing? He said, I'm serving my country. And man, that was just, I mean, I had to check myself for a second. Yeah, he was contributing to the mission. Someone had to do that job, and he was doing it. He was serving his country, no matter what the assignment, to the best of his ability. And, you know, and I still feel privileged to be able to go around the country and still see men and women like that, not asking for much, doing the best job that they can because they believe in what they're doing, preserving the values and principles that we hold dear as Americans. And I see it all, I see it everywhere. So, I took a lot of things growing up, learning, but I still, as a leader, I always go back to the great people that we have the privilege to lead. I think I always got more from them. I hope I was able to give back enough.
So, Mr. Richer, what does the CIA do with their garbage? Just packed it? Or...
It's classified. We don't have any garbage.
Good answer.
Yeah. Garbage in, garbage out. I've had a number of great leaders who set the example for me. As a young Marine sergeant, I was debating to stay in the Marine Corps or not, and this first lieutenant who was getting, a guy named Zach Johnson, who 40 years later I still have a friendship with, said to me one day, you can't spell, because I used to write reports for him. He said, you're getting a little chunky in uniform. He said, but you have the capabilities to go farther. And he said, if you'll listen to what I tell you to do and follow my example, I'll get you there. So he spent a year changing how I behaved, giving me examples of leadership, spending extra time teaching me spelling, making sure I took the Marine Corps Institute spelling class, and got me into an officer program. He did it not because of any personal satisfaction for himself, but it was something he thought I could be of benefit to the Marine Corps at the time, and it would benefit to me. I think the biggest example for me in my modern history, because that was a long time ago, was immediately after 9/11, and when the World Trade Centers came down, there was a CIA station in one of those buildings. There were 12 officers there. And what happened to that station is not documented, and I won't go into great detail, but the point was I met with the chief of station up in New York 3 days later. And I remember her saying, it's just a station we can rebuild. My people are accounted for. We know what happened to them or where they're at, but we can rebuild. And she was a subordinate to me. But my point being, I guess, with all this is that I see greatness every day, and I see great leaders every day. I have a wife who's deeply involved with homeless programs, social programs, writing congressmen every friggin' day on some issue that touches on social benefit to our society. And I learned leadership. I've seen great leadership through her from that. So to me, it's been a lifelong experience, and I hope to continue seeing great examples of leadership from people in this audience and from some of our political leaders.
Thank you, gentlemen.
That's great. Go ahead.
Midshipman First Class Jones, Naval Academy. I was just wondering if you could go into explaining a little bit of how you maintain proficiency and strive for excellence in your job, as well as maintaining a healthy relationship with your family members, knowing that, especially in the military, and you guys are at the highest level of the sports industry, how you maintain those relationships at home, as well as, like I said, striving to do the best in your job.
So the old balance. How do you do it?
Yeah, I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I don't think I was very good at it. I think we've come a long way in recognizing that we need to do a better job than that. And I go back. I have 4 children and 3 sons, and my youngest is a daughter who's still in high school. But I go back and I look at albums or pictures or now, on the computer of these different events throughout their lives, Christmas, birthdays, and I look back at all these things, and there's one common theme throughout them. I'm not there. And I look back, and you know, my wife did a great job raising them, but I just, you know, you can't get that back. And so as Master Chief of the Navy, and I know, I used to try for my staff, I knew if I got there at 6, they would be there at 5. And if I left at you know, 2000, they would stay till 2200. So, you know, as a leader, I tried to I wasn't just looking at myself for that, but I looked at the impact that you have by the example that you set for people, because they're going to be there to support you. They're dedicated, they want to do that. So I wish I would have done better with that. If there's anything that I can go back and redo, it's probably striking a better balance with that.
About from the athletic world?
Well, I think it's hard. I think as a player, I think it's a little bit easier because you know you have your family there supporting you, or at least I knew I had them there supporting me. And that's part of the whole thing. I didn't want to let them down. So if I knew they were supporting me, doing everything possible to enable me to be able to continue to play soccer, I made sure I got my work done. So that was my motivation with that. The second thing that was so great, being on the national team representing your country, it was another family. So things that you may be missing with your family, you gained with the second family. And Tony's atmosphere with the team was the best, I think, ever, especially our 99 team. Everyone knew their role. Everyone cared about each other. Everyone supported each other. With my friends on the team, we've gone through weddings, divorces, babies, death. We've covered it all, and we did it together as a group. So the things that maybe I did miss from my immediate family at home, I gained with that. And the best part, too, about it is I brought my family with me as much as I could. Now I have 2 little girls. I did play after I had my first, and she came on the road with me. So you did as much as you could, bringing your family with you or letting them know that you know that they're there. I think that's a very important thing, letting them know that you know that they're there and that you appreciate all that they've done for you.
Yeah, you know, we, the chief and I, who are I think the 2 oldest people on this board, on this side anyways, we came up with a process. We didn't have internet, we didn't have cell phones, which I think is a great thing for keeping communication when you're not there. I mean, it doesn't replace you being there, but it does help. My experience, both as a Marine, but mostly in the agency, was I was under alias. So I would disappear and go away and come back 3-4 months later. There was no phone calls. Because you're under alias, you can't send letters. My wife would know I was coming home when I came home. My daughter to this day can recite every birthday, every event I missed when she was growing up. Now, I think we've gotten beyond that. My daughter's here, by the way. I think we've gotten beyond that because I've been around a lot the last couple of years. But as the chief said, I don't think you ever catch up. I think you spend a lot of time trying to make up, and I think that hopefully you do get to the process where they get tired of seeing you so much. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. But I think that you have to, I mean, today's technology allows you to stay in touch, operational security allowing. I think that the next best thing to being there can be a phone call, can be an email, can be whatever they do on iPads, chat, FaceTime, all that stuff. I think that gives you some opportunities we don't have today, but I'll be honest with you, throughout my career, thank God I have a great wife of 30 plus years, because my kids would have turned out completely different if I did not. Thanks.
So I hate to say this, but we're going to have just one last question right here. And the person just behind who wanted to ask that other question, you can come on up and at the end when we dismiss everyone. Please, go ahead.
First of all, thank you for being here. My question is for Chief Major Campa. Can you please tell us the similarities between your role as Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps and your role as CEO, and what you brought from the Marines to the business world?
Okay, just a...
Small.
I didn't have the privilege of being the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, the Master Chief of the Navy. But so the difference between the two goals, or let me understand the question a little bit more.
I would say leadership style.
Leadership style? You know, I was telling someone this, and I might have been talking to Sergeant Major Kent about this, or at least I was telling someone, I think if I would have known what I know now as a leader, I would have been a better Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy. Because I'm still learning things. And I think you know, people have a perception, and when you get out there, you'll realize this, that just because you hold the rank doesn't make you a leader, and that just because you say something doesn't mean it'll get done. People have to believe in that. It's a little bit different in the corporate world. You do it a little bit differently, but I think I have a little bit more, for lack of a better term, a little bit more finesse. I think I'm a little bit better at building relationships with people than I was before. So I think there is a difference, but I've learned so much more, and it probably goes back to that question about, you know, leading yourself. I've had to lead myself so much over the last few years since I've been out. It's allowed me to grow. And I think as leaders, we're continual learners. And as I said earlier, if you think you got it all wrapped up real nicely, you know, you're kidding yourself. So there is a difference. You know, I think for what I knew then, I think I did the best I could. If I can go back again, what I know now, I'd probably be much more effective.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you've heard some great things today from some great people. And, you know, it's interesting that some of the themes that come out is this vision piece, how important that is for leaders and for followers to understand that vision, this idea of clarity, transparency. And maybe the most important thing that's come out in all four and the last two, when the general and the sergeant major talked about, was caring. Caring about your people as a leader and how followers react to that. And as followers, how we need to continue to learn how to do that so that when we're in those leadership positions, we know what it means to actually care for our people, because they're gonna follow us when we care. I'd like us to give one last hand to the panelists here, the three gentlemen and Kristine. They've done a great job. Thank you so much.
On behalf of the Naval Academy and the Leadership Conference staff, we'd like to present you with a gift as a token of our appreciation.